There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club and you ain't in it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is your host from coast to coast, Mad Sherman, and you are watching One Man's World View. Yeah, they got us by the balls, and it's a big old club, and we're not in it. Now, I'll be off the scene for a little while. I've been trying to, mess around with my little virtual studio and everything, trying to get it straight. And, a lot has been going on. Now, I have reported on the Ukraine and Russia situation, but it wasn't at this level. So consider this a continuation from my Ukraine and Russia video. And I can tell you this much, a lot of context has been left out of corporate media. Yeah. See, for some reason, they tend to leave out the things about the neo-Nazis being armed by the United States government. They tend to leave out the problems with the Nord Stream pipeline, the Minsk agreement or Minsk Accord. They tend to leave out the situation in Odessa where you got neo-Nazis burning people alive, Russian-speaking Ukrainians alive in the streets. I mean, there's a lot of things that's going on and a lot of moving parts. And it's hard for me to keep up with. I'm being honest. But what I'm going to do today, I'm going to report basically what I have found out and what I have researched. I really looked into this really deep. And then, like I said, there's a lot of things missing from corporate media. I mean, you got everything from the police state violence, surveillance, white supremacy, racism, capitalism, American imperialism, funding of neo-Nazis, war over resources, corruptions and coup d'etats, corporate media, and they fake news with propaganda. You got pandemics and climate change and famines and genocides and the brink of nuclear war. Take your pick. You're born in sin, come on in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to share a map with you. And this map is going to show you, in a way, visually, what is going on right now. So let me share my screen. All right, as you can see, I got 3 maps up here. The first map I want to concentrate on is NATO's eastward expansion. As you can see, right here on top, this is where NATO was in 1990, was occupying spaces here. All this in the blue. All right. Everything in the red is the Warsaw Pact territory. Now, you come down to here in 2009. This is around about a year or so within Barack Obama's administration. NATO has expanded between 1990 and 2009 all the way up to Russia's borders, to the point where some of the countries right here were part of the Warsaw Pact and became part of NATO. All right. And like up here, this is where it was after World War II. This is where it is now today, since 2009. Okay. All right. The next map I'd like to concentrate on. And see, that was the, and before I get to the next map, this is one of the contexts that the corporate media usually want to leave out. This expansion to NATO. And see, it was promised to Gorbachev after the Berlin Wall fell that NATO wouldn't expand eastward past Germany. And it's been expanding since then. You know, in 2008, William Byrne, he's a former Russian ambassador and now currently the CIA director. He said back in 2008, expanding NATO will be one of the reasons why Vladimir Putin will invade Ukraine. So this warning has been happening for over a decade now, well over a decade. And it's been told, don't do it. Don't expand NATO. There's no reason to expand NATO. As a matter of fact, NATO should have been abolished decades ago. The purpose of NATO, according to Noam Chomsky, and I'm going to show you a video of him. He's a very historical intellect and very good political, scientific intellect. But according to him, the purpose of NATO was to defend off Russian hordes. Now, there are no more Russian hordes anymore, all right? And NATO kept pushing the Overton Wilder, oh, we need NATO for this, we need NATO for that, we need NATO for this, we need NATO for that. Now, I'm going to tell you something. And I know this for a fact, and I might have said this too many times before, but NATO is an anti-black, anti-brown, anti-ethnical type of organization. And it's ran by white supremacists. But let's go ahead to the next map. All right, in this map right here, you got Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2. Now, Nord Stream 2 is a pipeline that runs from Russia, runs up under this Black Sea, and goes all the way to Germany. Now, the deal with that is that Joe Biden told Germany that you could go ahead and operate with this pipeline, get your resources from Russia, but as soon as they try anything as far as invading Ukraine, you got to turn it off. All right. So this is the pipeline that everybody's hollering about on the news. They'll say something about it, but the context is missing here. This is fuel that, from what I heard, I think Russia provides around 30 to 40% of its energy to Europe. And it would be disastrous for Europe not to get that fuel and that energy. You will have gas prices flying up. Because the pipeline being shut down, and the United States didn't want the pipeline in the first place. That's why they gave Germany the ultimatum of you can keep it open as long as Russia don't act up. And that's another context about this story. And then last but not least, if you could look over here in the red, Minsk and Donetsk. These are two Russian-speaking provinces, okay? All right. The neo-Nazis that the United States backed and armed comes across these borders right here. Russian-speaking Ukrainians, all right? And they killed them ever since 2008. They've been killing them. 14,000 Russian-speaking Ukrainian has been killed at the hands of the Azov Battalion, backed by the United States and NATO. So you got to understand, the United States be arming everybody. And I told you that in my last videos. They arm Al-Qaeda. They destroyed Libya. They bombed Afghanistan to oblivion. They bombed Syria so much they ran out of bombs. They bombed Iraq. And now we're bombing Somalia in Africa. So the thing about it is, the United States and NATO pressured Vladimir Putin, no matter how wrong he is. There got to be some context to why these things are happening. And I'm telling you, corporate media is leaving out a lot. The neo-Nazis, the expansion of NATO, the violation of the Minsk agreement. And see, the Minsk agreement is supposed to stop this slaughter in Donetsk and Luhansk. It's supposed to stop the slaughter. But see, the Ukrainians, all right, the Ukrainian Azov Battalion, the neo-Nazis, they didn't adhere to that agreement. It's supposed to be in a ceasefire. So I'm telling you, there is a lot of things going on. Russia and the United States is using Ukraine. I don't know why they got a C right here, but that's misspelled. Maybe this is because of the language up here. But anyway, I digress. Ukrainia, that's what they're saying right here. I guess in a certain Latin language, a Russian language. And this is the capital of Kyiv. All right. Or Kiev. Some people pronounce it differently. You got basically the war is happening between here and here and here and here. This is what all the conflict is going on. And like I said, there was some of these citizens in Odessa, and they got burned alive by these neo-Nazis. So those are some of the context of this story. And next, I want to share a video with you. I will leave the link to these maps where you can take a closer look at them. And the video that I'm going to play is going to be for educational purpose and for fair use. So let me share my screen with the video. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I need to show you what the Minsk agreement was all about. So I'm going to share my screen with you one more time. As you can see right here, we're going to start reading. This is from Al Jazeera News. And I will leave a link at the bottom of the page in the description. So let's start reading. Ukraine and the Russian-backed separatists agreed on a 12-point ceasefire deal in September of 2014. Now, see, between 2014 2015, they were getting Ukrainians were getting assaulted and killed by neo-Nazis of the Azov battalion. They penetrated the Ukraine army. So keep that in mind for context. In provision included prisoner exchange, deliveries of humanitarian aid, and the withdrawal of heavy weapons. However, the agreement quickly broke down with violations by both sides. Minsk 2. Representatives of Russia, Ukraine, and the Organization for Security and the Cooperation of Europe. All right, that's the OSCE. Now, the OSCE is one of the largest, or if not the largest, security firms in the world when it comes to intergovernment affairs and NATO. And like I told you before, if I haven't said anything, I'm going to tell you now, NATO is the military for the New World Order. That's why that's in the title. This is the New World Order making moves. All right. I'm going to read that again. Representatives of Russia, Ukraine, and Organizations for Security and Cooperation of Europe, and the leaders of separatist held regions. That's in Donetsk and Luhansk. That's those Russian separatists that was fighting against those neo-Nazis. Signed a 13-point agreement in February of 2015. The leaders of France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine gathered in Minsk. Minsk is, I believe, a city in Belarus. And I think Minsk is the city, the reason why the agreement was named after that. So that's why they call the Minsk Agreement. Minsk to mark the occasion and issue a declaration of support. The deal, 13 points were: immediate comprehensive ceasefire, withdrawal of heavy weapons by both sides. The OSCE is monitoring all of this. Once they do all this, OSCE is supposed to monitor this. Dialogue of internal self-government for Donetsk and Luhansk. In other words, that give them their independence from Ukraine or Russia. In accordance, not or Russia, but and Russia. In accordance with Ukraine law and acknowledgement of special status by parliament. Pardon amnesty for fighters. Exchange of hostages and prisoners. Humanitarian assistance. Resumption of socio-economic ties, including pensions. Ukraine to restore the control of state border. Withdrawal of foreign armed formations. Military equipment. Mercenaries. Constitutional reform in Ukraine, including decentralization, with specific mentions of Donetsk and Luhansk. Give them their freedom. Elections in Donetsk and Luhansk. Intensified trilateral contact group working, including representatives of Russia, Ukraine, and the OSCE. So they give you a rundown of what the Minsk agreement was all about. This is one of these other contexts that you probably have not heard in mainstream media or corporate media, who's sponsored by Pfizer and Lockheed Boeing and Northrop Grumman. You know, those news they're sponsored by those guys. They're not gonna get down in the nooks and crannies like this. Like I said, I dig deep into the things. So with that said, I'm gonna switch over to a video. This is Noam Chomsky. And there's one more thing, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to put in context before I start this video. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was on the board of an energy company called Burisma in Ukraine. This was in 2014 too. See, Joe Biden been involved in this ever since he's been vice president, and maybe before then, but that as far as I check back. His son is a drug addict, knows nothing about energy. So how did he end up with a job on the board at an energy company in Ukraine? And guess what? They were paying this man $80,000 a month. You see how deep the corruption runs here? So when you get up there and see that man speak, it ought to just make your ears just melt off your head. Because all he's doing is gaslighting you, telling you lies. Yep, lying Joe Biden. So let's start the video. And here's Noam Chomsky. One second.
Noam Chomsky, if you can comment on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine.
What's happening is quite ugly, and I think the criticisms are mostly accurate, but they're kind of beside the point. There's a background that we have to think about. It's fashionable now in the United States and Britain to condemn Putin as some sort of distorted mind. There's an article in Psychology.
You have to excuse how Noam Chomsky talk. He always talk like this. Don't let his voice distract you, because if you let it distract you, you won't hear what he's saying. So pay attention. Thank you.
Today, analyzing his brain, asking why he's so arrogant. He's been accused of having Asperger's, irritable, rat-faced man, as he's described by Timothy Garton Ash, and so on. This is all very reminiscent of the early 1950s, when I was a graduate student then. At that time, the U.S. had overwhelming power, and it was able to use the United Nations as a battering ram against its enemy, the Soviet Union. So Russia was, of course, vetoing lots of resolutions condemning it. And the leading anthropologists in the United States and England began to analyze why the Russians are so negative, what makes them say no at the United Nations all the time. And their proposal was that the Russians are negative because they raise their children in swaddling clothes, and that makes them negative. The 3 or 4 of us at Harvard who thought this ridiculous used to call it diaperology. That's being reenacted, the takeoff on criminology. This is being reenacted right now. But the fact is, whatever you think about Putin, okay, irritable, rat-faced man with Asperger's, whatever you like, the Russians have a case, and you have to understand the case.
And those cases were the context that I was showing you before. The expansion of NATO, the threatening of sanctioning Russia by cutting the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the attacks on the halts and Donetsk on those Russia-speaking Ukrainians, and the fact that the United States is funding these neo-Nazis that's committing all this crime and murder and mayhem. Let's continue the video.
The case is understood here by people who bother to think. So, for example, there was a lead article in Foreign Affairs, the main establishment journal, by John Mearsheimer, with the title like something like "The West is Responsible for the Ukraine Crisis," and he was talking about the background. The background begins with the fall of the Soviet Union. 1989, 1990, there were negotiations between President Bush, James Baker, and Mikhail Gorbachev about how to deal with the issues that arose at the time. A crucial question is what happens to NATO? NATO had been advertised since its beginning as necessary to protect Western Europe from the Russian hordes. Okay, no more Russian hordes, so what happens to NATO? Well, we know what happened to NATO, but the crucial issue was this.
Yeah, we know what happened to NATO.
NATO set the Middle East on fire, along with the United States. Starting with George Bush, then Barack Obama turning 2 wars into 7. Then Donald Trump getting in and increasing drone strikes by over 430%. Yeah, that's a real number. 430% more drone strikes during the Trump administration. And here comes Joe Biden and all his corruption coming out. Let's continue the video.
Gorbachev agreed to allow Germany, a unified Germany, to join NATO, a hostile military alliance. It's a pretty remarkable concession if you think about the history of the preceding century, half century. It's Germany alone had practically destroyed Russia several times, and now he was agreeing to have Germany join a hostile military alliance led by the only superpower. But there was a quid pro quo that NATO would not move 1 inch to the east. That was the phrase that was used in the interchanges, meaning to East Germany. And on that condition, they went forward. NATO immediately moved to East Germany. When Gorbachev vigorously protested, naturally, he was informed by the United States that it was only a verbal commitment. It wasn't on paper. The unstated implication is if you're naive enough to think you can make a gentleman's agreement with us, it's your problem. They didn't say that. I'm saying that. But the NATO moved to East Germany. Under Clinton, moved right up to Russia's borders. Just a couple of weeks ago, U.S. Military equipment was taking part in a military parade in Estonia, a couple hundred yards from the Russian border. Russia is surrounded by U.S. Offensive weapons. Sometimes they're called defense, but they're all offensive weapons. And the idea that the new government in Ukraine that took over after the former government was overthrown, last December, late December, it passed a resolution overwhelmingly, I think something like 308 or something, announcing its intention to take steps to join NATO. For no Russian leader, no matter who it is, could tolerate Ukraine right at the geostrategic center of Russian concerns joining a hostile military alliance. I mean, we can imagine, for example, how the U.S. would have reacted, say, during the Cold War if the Warsaw Pact had extended to Latin America and Mexico and Canada were now planning to join the Warsaw Pact. Of course, that's academic because the first step would have led to a violent U.S. response and wouldn't have gone any further.
A Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to think about what actually happened at the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is very striking. The crucial issue at the missile crisis was...
It wasn't striking. It was amazing. But let's continue the video.
The peak moment was October 26th and 27th, right at the end. Khrushchev had sent a letter to Kennedy offering to end the crisis by simultaneous public withdrawal of Russian missiles from Cuba and U.S. missiles from Turkey. These were obsolete missiles for which a withdrawal order had already been given because they were being replaced by much more lethal U.S. missiles and Polaris submarines, invulnerable submarines. So that was the offer. They would withdraw the missiles. We would withdraw obsolete missiles, which were already being replaced by more lethal ones. Kennedy refused, and his own subjective assessment, whatever that means, of nuclear war was a third to a half. But that's got to be the most horrific decision in history. First off, back down. Fortunately, the U.S. did secretly say that it would withdraw the obsolete missiles, of course, which didn't need any more. But if you take a look at the balance of power that was assumed to be legitimate, you have to establish the principle that we have a right to surround anyone with lethal offensive weapons that can obliterate them in a second.
And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Now, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase what he just got through saying. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Russia was putting missiles in Cuba. We was putting missiles in Turkey, which is close to Russia. So there came an agreement where Russia removed all their missiles. We remove all our missiles. But our missiles are obsolete and already being replaced by new upgraded missiles. In other words, we get to keep our new upgraded missiles in Turkey, but y'all got to move all y'all missiles. The United States have over 1,000 bases worldwide. You know how many Russia got? 10, maybe. So when they go to spreading all that propaganda in the news, they really being hyperbolic about what's going on with the Ukrainians. Compare what happened to the Middle East to all those brown babies. So I'm going to share my screen with the very last video, and I'm going to make a point here. Give me just a moment. And we're going to share this video here. Now, this next video is from the Savvy Sab channel. Her name is Sabrina Savati. I think I'm saying that right. She is also a very good leftist show to watch. She had plenty of guests on, people who know what they're talking about. She knows what she's talking about. And she is also part of the Political Revolutionary Blackout Network. So I will leave the link at in the description of the page, and I implore you to check her channel out. And with that said, this guy named Caleb Maupin, he's gonna explain to you about the Ukraine conflict in layman's term better than Noam Chomsky. So with that said, here we go.
Everyone, Caleb Maupin is here. He is back. So I definitely want to get your insight about the conflict with Russia and Ukraine. I know you've seen a lot of things on Twitter as well. There's been a lot of people going around calling people Russian apologists, saying that they're secret Russian assets. I just heard the other day that RT was taken down in some countries. So I want to get your take on this. Can you please explain to everyone what really started this whole conflict? Because from what I've read, this has been going on for 8 years.
Sure. Well, as far as the first thing that you said, my personal Twitter account that belongs to me personally, does not belong to my employers at RT, has nothing to do with anybody in Russia, just belongs to me, a US born citizen from Ohio who doesn't even speak Russian, who doesn't come from a Russian family, has been labeled Russian state affiliated media. And that's BS. My employers at RT do not tell me what to tweet. Nobody in Russia tells me what to tweet. I decide what I put on my personal Twitter account. And the fact that Twitter labeled it that way shows you what they're doing. They don't want you to listen to what certain people have to say. And so they pin a label on them and say, oh, don't believe anything they say because they're this. Meanwhile, you know, I mean, just watching that clip that you just showed me, I mean, and you just showed on there I mean, how much fake news is coming out from mainstream media? So many videos that have been debunked, that have been from Libya or from Syria or from Palestine or from.
And what he's talking about, there's been a lot of circulation of fake media passing through social media saying that this happened at Ukraine when it happened in the past at a different location. So there's a lot of lies. Excuse me with the sound. There's a lot of lies and propaganda going on. So let's continue the video.
From Iraq or from video games are circulating. I mean, they are just putting out fake clips everywhere, but we're supposed to keep trusting them. And then because
yeah, they even put out one. There was a video game saying that it was a Ukrainian jet, I guess, land to air defense cannon shooting down a Russian plane. It was a darn video game. Let's continue.
I work at a Russian company, you know, you can just push this, you can just pin this on my Twitter and label me as a Russian asset or whatever. When I'm a patriotic American from here in the United States, I'm a socialist, I'm a left winger. You know, I was marching in support of the peoples of Donetsk and Lugansk back in 2014 before I ever worked at RT. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But as far as how this started when the United States overthrew Ukraine's government. In 2014, the United States toppled the elected government led by Viktor Yanukovych, and they installed a virulently anti-Russian government. And the people in the eastern regions declared independence. And they asked Russia to recognize their independent governments, and Russia said no. And instead, Russia supported the Minsk agreement. They said, no, we don't want you to join Russia. We don't want you to be independent of Ukraine. We want you to reintegrate back into Ukraine, and we have been supporting the Minsk peace process to allow and enable that to happen. That's what happened. And in 2015, those Minsk agreements were signed and they were not implemented. The exact opposite of what those Minsk agreements said was carried out. They shelled and bombed and attacked and sent drones to attack the eastern regions. 14,000 people are dead. And these regions, Donetsk and Lugansk, have continually been attacked. Now, then about a month ago, we had US officials who came out and they just started announcing to the world that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine. And Russia was like, no, we're not going to invade Ukraine. That's not going to happen. We're not going to invade Ukraine. And they said, no, Russia is about to.
Yeah. The United States knew they was going to invade Ukraine because they was pushing them to do it. They kept making moves in order to force Russia's hand. So let's continue the video.
Invade Ukraine. And Russia said, we are not planning to invade Ukraine. And Russia actually started moving their troops away from the border to prove that they weren't going to invade Ukraine. And just as they started moving their troops away from the border, that is when there were bombs that went off. And, you know, on Friday, you had explosions in Donetsk and explosions in Lugansk. And these explosions started going off and you had an escalation of the shelling. And then it became clear what the United States was doing. They were threatening to invade. They were playing up the idea that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine, so that when they went and did an all-out, onslaught to retake these eastern regions, Russia would feel they weren't able to move in and protect the people there. That's what it was. It was a maneuver. They were going to set the stage for. They knew that they were planning to attack these eastern regions. And they knew Russia would feel obligated to protect the people there. So they were trying to psych up the world for when Russia moved in to protect these people, Russia would look like the aggressor. And for a month, they beat the drum that Russia's about to invade Ukraine. And then they went ahead and attacked the eastern regions. And Russia said, okay, now we know what's going on. And so they moved their forces in. They recognized, after 8 years of waiting, they recognized the People's Republic of Donetsk and the People's Republic of Lugansk. And then from there, after that, they sent their forces furthermore into Ukraine to break apart the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military.
And the reason why they did that is to get the infiltrators, the Nazi infiltrators, out of Ukraine, because they even infiltrated parts of the government. So Russia's hands was forced. They had to protect the Russian-speaking Ukrainians because the Azov battalion, the Nazis wouldn't stop. Wouldn't hold to the Minsk agreement. Didn't recognize it. Let's continue.
That has been shelling and bombing and attacking the people of the eastern regions for the past 8 years, has killed 14,000 of them. Not only do they want to protect the people there, but they want to break apart that Ukrainian military that the US government has been pouring weapons into, that has a special neo-Nazi division called the Azov Battalion. They want to break it up so that they can't continue to terrorize these people. And they will withdraw their forces from the country. They have no intention of occupying Ukraine, but they're not going to withdraw their forces until they have a clear understanding that Ukraine is not going to join the NATO alliance and Ukraine is going to leave the people of Lugansk and Donetsk alone. This is a picture you will never see on CNN. And I've got this picture here because they have never shown it on CNN. The whole world needs to see this. This is a monument in Lugansk to all the children who have died from the shelling that has taken place with US-made weapons. These are stuffed animals down here, and these are the faces of all the children who've been killed. All of these people have been dying over the past 8 years. These are children.
All in the mighty dollar. All for the cream. Cash rules everything around me. The United States do not care about Ukrainians. They do not care about us or anybody else in the world. And as soon as everybody start realizing that, the better off we'll be, so we can start making different changes. But we still got a lot of us asleep. And most of them are the ones that voted. Let's continue.
They've got parents, they've got brothers and sisters, they've got mothers, they've got fathers, they've got their names here on the memorial below. All of these people were killed by the US aligned regime in Kiev. They were killed. These are all children under the age of 18, most of them under the age of 12, who died as a result of what this government has been doing. And Russia has sat back and said, implement the Minsk agreements, just implement the Minsk agreements. They waited for 8 years. When Biden called this an unprovoked action last night, that was ridiculous. Lying. It has been provoked and provoked and provoked and provoked. It was provoked when the USA toppled the Ukrainian government and installed a fanatical anti-Russian government in Kiev. It was provoked when they shelled the eastern regions and attacked these people. It was provoked when the USA talked about having the Ukrainian government that is so hostile to Russia join NATO. It was provoked when the government in Kiev announced that they were thinking about getting nuclear weapons. It was provoked. Can you imagine for a moment that some racist conservative governor in Texas or Arizona or New Mexico passed a law and started taking Latino or Chicano people to court for speaking Spanish, right? That would be rightly denounced as a very racist, evil thing to do. But that's what the government in Kiev has been doing. They have been giving people tickets and taking them to court, giving them court appearances for speaking Russian, their own language. Can you believe this? This is what they've been doing for the past 8 years. People have been dragged to court, fined for speaking their own language. They have torn down World War II memorials. There are World War II memorials all over Ukraine because many Ukrainians heroically fought the Nazis. But the new government that was installed by the United States has been tearing those World War II memorials down and instead building memorials.
And the thing about it here, we can stop the video here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And out of here, we all know that the United States has a history of dealing with Nazis and playing along with them. Y'all remember something called Operation Paperclip? Yeah, Operation Paperclip. That's when, at the end of World War II, the United States government captured and recruited Nazi scientists to work for them. So we got a long history of just working with everybody, no matter how terrible they are. Von Braun is one of the most famous Nazi scientists that got recruited by the United States, or should I say the New World Order. Now, I will say to you that you have to start paying attention to what is really going on. Stop believing everything that corporate media tells you, even your local news, ladies and gentlemen. They're not going to tell you all the truth. And it's real easy to spot a lie. So you got Russia versus Ukraine, all because the United States basically instigated a fight. And now innocent people are dying in Ukraine because of it. Because of the United States foolishness. So all I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, stop electing these fools. They're trying to kill us all. And with that said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Peace. I am out.